So while Biden continues to ask his staff if he's still running, he's got a new project, and it's a big one. He wants to change how the Supreme Court works, which is interesting because in 1983, when Biden was a senator, yes, I know, 1983, and yet all of America's problems are still Trump's fault, but in 1983, he called FDR's plan to place term limits on older justices and expand the size of the court, quote, boneheaded.
He was legalistically absolutely correct, but it was a bonehead idea. It was a terrible, terrible mistake to make, and it put in question, for an entire decade, the independence of the most significant body, including the Congress, in my view, the most significant body in this country, the Supreme Court of the United States of America.
So Biden is back in 2024 with the intention to introduce term limits, a binding code of ethics, and to reverse the presidential immunity decision. Now, can Biden actually do this, or is this just to keep him busy so he doesn't realize Kamala is trying to take his job? Let's find out. When news organizations called Biden's office for a comment, they declined. Gee, I wonder why. Probably because they realize their boss is off his meds again and is trying to change how the Supreme Court works after he gave in his 6-month notice. But anyway, the setting of term limits for justices on the Supreme Court would require a constitutional amendment. Now, the Constitution is a hard document to change. It's not written on a Google Doc. You pay a lot of money for people to disagree all day long about what to put into this document, like the Supreme Court reform. So step 1 is a proposal of the amendment. This has to be initiated by Congress. In order to get the actual proposal through, you need a 2/3 vote of both houses of Congress. This means that both the House of Representatives and the Senate must approve the amendment by a supermajority vote. So good luck with that. There's not enough steak dinners in the world to make that supermajority happen. But the irony does not get lost on me about Biden asking for term limits, because he was a senator for 36 years, and the only thing anyone can ever remember about his time on the Senate is that he loved riding on the Amtrak train. Now, he's the oldest president we've ever had, dropped out of the race because he can't talk, and now he's the one of all people saying Supreme Court judges shouldn't have a job for life. We have no term limits for Supreme Court judges because the English monarchs would often toss judges out if they didn't like what they had to say. So being in the United States, we wanted to do the opposite and relieve the most important judges from political pressure. Now, Biden's agenda for reform and the upcoming polls that I'm going to be talking about are all from research at Politico and other various news outlets. Information could change after Biden's announcement on Monday. So Biden wanted to know what would be next in the congressional process, so he spoke with lawmakers in the Congressional Progressive Caucus during a virtual meeting last Saturday. He had been consulting with these folks for more than a month. He said, "I'm going to need your help and advice on how we should be doing what I'm going to be doing there. Want to make sure we have a closer working relationship because we're in this together." I thought that was very inspiring, especially the part where he said how we should be doing what I'm going to be doing there. So if Biden gets approval by Congress, the proposed amendment must be ratified by 3/4 of the states, meaning that at least 38 states must approve the amendment. So now you can be glad that the Founding Fathers made it very difficult to change this document. So just in case a guy who can't put two sentences together does end up in office, he isn't able to go in and make some quick changes.
Eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
But I do have to give some credit to Biden on some of his concerns. Had he brought up some of these concerns before he was president, it might have actually gone over much better. The binding code of ethics is especially interesting. In case you didn't know, the Supreme Court operates with a high degree of independence. There's ethical guidelines, kind of like when your teacher says you're not supposed to slide down the railings, but there aren't rules around ethics. So you potentially end up with a situation where Clarence Thomas gets $2.4 million in gifts. Then AOC does what she does every weekend and files for articles of impeachment. The thing is, the law states that he just has to disclose the gifts. It doesn't say anything about him not being able to accept them. However, rather than ask questions about this and get the nation talking about it, we heard this from Biden's call to lawmakers. It's not hyperbole to suggest Trump is literally an existential threat to the very constitution of democracy we say we care about. And I mean, if this guy wins, he's not. And now, especially with that Supreme Court giving him the kind of breath of, I don't need to get into the Supreme Court right now anyway, but I need your help. Now, it is a common thing to spend the end of your presidency to solidify your legacy and make it harder for the next president to undo what you've done. However, nobody has taken it to the Supreme Court level. And it is funny that This guy's whole insurance policy is for if his vice president loses to his former opponent. I figure this is going to be Biden's main job, which means it occupies his good time between 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Foreign policy stuff and inflation, that would have to go in the evening. Now click this video if you want to watch Biden's last speech before dropping out.